Hello and welcome to lecture 34, where I'll be showing you how to set up the correct AOVs for your compositing software. So let's jump right into it and go to the render settings and head over to the AOVs tab. So you might ask, what are AOVs? And to kind of try to explain it in simple terms, it's each component which adds up to the beauty render. So a component is something like diffuse or specular or reflection or refraction. So whatever is in the shader, you can actually split it up in several components to be able to have more control later on in your 2D package to adjust your render. So a quick overview what AOVs are, you can head over to the Arnold AOV settings, and you can see in the top line here, you can see these are several components which make up the beauty render on the left here. So we have a base diffuse, then we have a scattering pass, it looks like we have a specular pass and an indirect diffuse pass. So all these guys together produce the beauty AOV. And we can easily set this up again if we go to render settings, head over to the AOVs tab. And on the left, you have a really long list of AOVs which you can work with. And depending on your shaders and your scene setups, you would need to choose different AOVs each time. So unless you want to be sure, you can actually select all and create them. But I would not recommend this, as most of them will not be needed and actually are doubling up and will increase your render time at some point. If you know you have subsurface scattering, or if you have codes or all that, obviously you should add them, but you can be sure if you have set up the look dev which AOVs to output. So the most basic ones which should be always output is diffuse albedo, direct and indirect. Then there is specular, the same, albedo, direct and indirect. And obviously if you have scattering, which most of the time you should have because it's a realistic attribute, you should output albedo, direct and indirect. Transmission is kind of for glass effect, so we should do this for our car render on the left. We should output the albedo, direct and indirect. If you have volume like VDBs, explosions, it's all these guys. If you want to have separate shadow matte AOVs, it's these guys. And this is for toon shading, and these ones are for special mattes for comp, which is a bit too advanced for this lecture. And then we have some debug and geometry AOVs like normal, position, pref, we have z-pass, and then this is back to the shaders. I just want to set up the AOVs for this render. So I know I have diffuse because the car paint, and I have dust. So let me just add all these three guys, direct and indirect. If you don't want to have a separation for direct and indirect, you can just add diffuse, which is these two guys plus together. So I just separate them and add all three. So I'm selecting them and enabling them so they are now active. And the next thing, I want to use emission because we have emission down here, but let's just add this for now. And the next thing, I definitely have specular for my metallic car paint and for all the other metallic effects. So let's just add all these guys. I'm pretty sure we don't have scattering, so we don't have SSS, but again, we have transmission. So let's add these guys as well. I know we don't have volumes, we don't have volume opacity, and we can just ignore the rest. Except we might actually add, normal pass. We might add position pass. These are just interesting comp passes. It's not really that important, but I'm just outputting a few which I think are interesting. Okay, so now we have normal, we have P, which is position, and we have the AA samples, inverse intensity, which is used for denoising, which I will not go into, but it's just something you can always output to be sure you have them. So let's just start a render and see how they all look like. So now we can see just by opening the drop-down menu, we have lots of AOVs for this render. So if I choose, for instance, diffuse albedo, you can actually see our diffuse textures. You can see our dust, which we added. So it works really well. And for instance, diffuse direct would look like this. So you can easily just change your light colors based on these AOVs. We have specular albedo, which is our base color for our specular highlights. We have our direct specular, And just by going through the list, we can actually see we don't have our code, which we need to add still. And you can also see emission is blank, but we actually added emission to our headlights, but they actually appear in the transmission indirectly. And you can see here's all the emission passes. Let's just update quickly and add the codes. And now we should actually just update the render, and we should be able to see our code AOVs as well. So if I head to the code direct, you can now see that the code is added as well. And we can see how super nice and glossy it is. And this is exactly what you want to do. In comp, you could now actually just change the exposure differently. You can actually colorize it, and you can also do all sorts of things to break it up even more. You can add scratches, you can add some noise breakup. This is the indirect pass of that. And then we have our normal pass, which is just giving our surfaces a normal direction. We have our world position pass. You can see down here the values. They range from all sorts of numbers. What else is interesting? Transmission we talked about, direct and indirect. And these are all our AOVs, which are arbitrary output variables. And I will not go into compositing it because it's just too much, and this course is entitled as lighting and shading. So this is just showing you how to actually output your renders and how to set up AOVs for future compositing. So I hope this gave you an insight on how to set all things up for comp, and I will see you in the next lecture.